Welcome to Mindfulness of Doom, a weekly podcast about life, peaceful living, and existential dread. You're not lost. Everyone's faking it, and the purpose of life is, enjoy the show.
Well then, let's just get right back into it. This episode brought to you by the podcast show. Click on it. Terrible. What up? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This show is a podcast called Mindfulness of Doom with your hosts, Cory and Brian Limmerman, with special guest, Brian Kerr. Cut that last part out.
Nope.
It's staying in.
It's staying in. Yeah, we've got a special guest, Brian Kerr, who is a local Miami comedian and artist, and happens to have a very unique mindfulness practice and method of study. We brought him onto the show today, not only as our biggest fan, but as somebody who is deep in the world of meditation and has a lot to offer our listeners.
Yes, but before we get to Brian, we have a couple announcements to make. We have an event coming up, Brian. Did you know that?
Yeah, we do, actually. Cory and I are going to be speaking about turning fear into fascination at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Miami on Sunday, December 3rd at 11 a.m. You're welcome to come and join us. Attendance is free, and we'll also be leading a meditation during the event.
You can check them out at uumiami.org.
We at Mindfulness of Doom don't have any particular religious affiliations, and then we learned that the Unitarian Universalists also don't have any religious affiliations that they can speak of.
I enjoy a congregation that is open-minded, and I hope they're ready to hear about their impending doom. Brian, did you know that we have two patrons?
What? We have,
Wait.
Yeah.
We do?
Yes. We have two patrons.
Both named Brian?
Neither of them named Brian.
This is getting confusing.
Yeah, we have two patrons, and we'd like to thank you guys for supporting our show. It helps us get coffee and not starve while making the podcast.
Yeah, and Cory and I are working on a business where we'll be teaching mindfulness and other avenues of holistic wellness online in a way that doesn't normally get taught in our primary education system. We're making real-life skills available to more people, and your support helps us to build that project and keep this podcast online.
Yeah, so if you'd like to support the show and help us in our endeavors to spread mindfulness, you can help support us at www.patreon.com/mindfulnessofdoom.
Mindfulness of Doom.
And I guess that brings us to our very special guest, Brian Kerr, local Miamian, comedian, artist, yogi, mindfulness practitioner, and biggest fan of Mindfulness of Doom.
Mindfulness of Doom.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I can't believe I'm finally here in this beautiful studio, which is currently sweltering.
It is sweltering. We are sweating. It is like a hot yoga studio in here. And the building is fully air-conditioned, and this room is not.
This room apparently has no vents.
It has three, actually. It has three.
It was very well air-conditioned on every other podcast we've done, but Brian Kerr has raised the level of awesomeness in this room beyond what is humanly...
I run a little hot. I'm a little hot-blooded over here.
Yeah, quite frankly, we're having a hard time keeping up.
Well, you know, I'm a little bit.
Mind if I undo the top button?
Not at all. Well, our
Brian,
patrons and listeners would love that.
Your shirt is... Your shirt is amazing. I did not notice this until you pointed it out earlier before the show started.
It's a pretty great shirt.
You have a fantastic collared,
plaid.
It's flannel. Is it flannel or plaid? It's plaid.
I think it's plaid.
Yeah, it's plaid.
We'll
go with plaid.
It's kind of a linen.
Yeah. But in the white checkered portions of your shirt, there are little fake. Not fake. I'm sorry.
Embroidered.
They're little.
Go with embroidered.
They are very subtle, hard to notice skull and crossbones all throughout his shirt, and I did not notice it all day until he came into the studio.
And he wore it specifically for the podcast, and you did not notice.
You were not mindful of the doom all over my shirt.
Unbelievable, Cory.
Hey, do as I mindfully say, not as I mindfully do.
There you
go. Brian, you have a YouTube channel, don't you?
I have a YouTube channel. It's not completely horse shit. It's kind of funny and weird. And yeah, I have an ongoing show. I'm on my 3rd season, currently searching for my 2nd season. And we are always in production. We just begun this year. So please subscribe to Same Old Channel on YouTube. I don't really know how to find it.
It's all right.
Google.
Same Old is written as one word.
Yep. Same Old, one word.
Yep.
Channel. Space and channel.
Yep. Same Old space channel.
But it has nothing to do with space. You're just using space as a character.
Space bar.
Channel.
Oh.
Space bar.
Space bar.
Wait,
channel.
You can get drinks in outer space?
You can go to the cantina. You can hear your favorite little elephant play the xylophone.
At the Star Wars?
At the Star Wars cantina.
Star Wars cantina?
Yeah.
At the Star Wars cantina. Weirdest creatures you've ever seen.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a very silly show. It's kind of pure insanity. Please tune in, subscribe, rate, and like.
And as I saw, there's some meditation also in some of your episodes.
Oh, yes.
And
wizardry, and all sorts of magic.
And your music also. You're a musician as well.
Just a little bit.
I would have to say that I'm always impressed by my artist friends who are talented in one particular skill and they get really good at it. But Brian is one of these people that when I first met him, everything he touches turns to artistic gold. This man can sing, he can paint, he can sculpt, he can act, he can perform, he's funny, and he's connected to the life of this planet in a way that I have not seen in an individual. This man is on the path, if not already enlightened.
Whew. You know what they say, master of all trades, jack of none.
But better than a master of one.
So I understand, Brian, that you're studying with Swami G down in South Miami. Tell us a little bit about your practice and what you've been working on.
Well, yes, I attend lectures at the Yoga Research Foundation in South Miami with Swami Jyotirmayananda Saraswati from Rishikesh, disciple of Swami Shivananda. Maybe you heard of him. Anyway, I go there and listen to lectures on Vedanta. He goes over various scriptures like Raja Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, things like that. And it's just great. It's Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. And part of my practice, I was initiated into mantra practice, or Japa Yoga, which is the reciting the mantra using a mala, which is like a rosary. And supposed to be doing that every day, and I try.
Got it. Well, that brings us to the topic of our show, actually, which is imperfect practices. We all have our ideals, and we often fall off of them. Mm-hmm. That there's no practice that is absolutely perfect. If I make a commitment to meditate for 20 minutes a day, or an hour a day, or if I make a practice to be mindful in every time I brush my teeth, or every time I'm cooking a meal and I forget, or I slip up, or I get distracted, what does that mean about me? Does it make me a terrible person? Does it throw me out of integrity?
Yes.
Does it mean that I'll never amount to anything in life?
Yes. Brian, you have just told me that you are not a perfect individual. I thought you were the Godhead.
Well,
Getting
this
there.
is
Pretty close.
Yeah, this is awkward. We're gonna have to hash that out. When it comes to having a perfect practice, there are times when doing everything to perfection may not actually work out in our favor. Every day is different.
I know I've said it at least twice before on the podcast, and I swear I've got more quotes to share, but one of my big inspirations was Zay Frank, one of the original YouTubers, and he had a show, not to be confused with Brian Kerr's This Show, and he said, perfectionism may look good in his shiny shoes, but he's a bit of an asshole, and nobody invites him to their pool parties. And it's true, because if you spend too much time trying to make the idea in your head come out the way you imagine it, you will find yourself not being able to create that perfect action, and you have to give in to imperfect action and realize that language is not perfect and communication is not perfect, and the idea in your head, the words you choose to display that message, the way someone hears it, and the way their mind interprets that message all have spaces for misinterpretation. And you just have to be satisfied with putting something out there. And Brian, as an artist, Brian Kerr, as an artist.
Yep.
I'm also an artist, by the way. This is getting really difficult. This is,
You know, the artist, Brian.
The artist.
The artist formerly known as Brian has... I'm always impressed with your work. I'm always impressed that you put so much stuff out there, because every time I even want to write my own blog, I have these crushing self-doubts of imperfection and can't do it the way that I want to do it. And what do you do? How do you overcome that?
Well, I have a hard time creating if I'm not feeling good, if I'm not vibing on everything. But one way I get over that is do a lot of stream of consciousness kind of artwork where I don't really have a direction. I'm just putting marks on a page and allowing myself to relax into the flow of that. And once I get into that pattern, I get into the groove, and then, some good, fruitful creations can happen even though I wasn't really feeling it in the beginning. Just going through the motions of something simple and relaxing can lead to words that are better than the words that are coming out of my mouth. You know what I mean?
I totally get it. It's like knowing that when you get stopped, it's like when you have artist block.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's a technique that you can use to get yourself back into the flow.
Exactly.
And actually having the self-discipline to employ that technique even when you don't feel like it.
The discipline that I struggle with, that's for sure.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that lemon.
Lemon?
Lemon. Yeah, lemon and carrot.
I'll take it.
Because you mentioned that producing art, even when you don't feel like it, you go through with the imperfect action of getting it out there. And then Mr. Carrot over here, he mentioned that making art when you're happy, when you're making art when you're comfortable and relaxed. And it seems like two different ways of making art, of one of just like putting something out there, and one is like waiting until you're in the right headspace. Do either of you see this as a dichotomous, or?
I think both processes are creative processes. One involves a higher level of discipline, I think, in terms of, let's say if I consider myself a professional artist or a professional writer, and I have a commitment to write or produce artwork or music on a regular basis. And I wake up one day and I have a deadline and I'm just not feeling like I'm in the headspace, or my heart's not open, and I can't get the words to flow, or I don't want to draw anything. I've made the commitment. I have two choices. I can back out and recommit or fall out of integrity, or I can employ, as Brian said, certain techniques or tools to get myself back in the flow when I need to perform, such that I can produce and satisfy my commitments. I know a lot of people who they dabble in art, or it's kind of like a hobby, and when they're feeling it, then they'll produce, but it may not be their main gig.
I read an article, perhaps it was an interview, and I'm going to have to look this up and put the link up on the Patreon, but I think it was the author, Jim Butcher, author of the Dresden Files. It also may have been Piers Anthony. Both of them are professional writers. And I remember one of them was telling a story about how they got invited to speak at a forum on writing, and this is early in their career, and they had one other guy there who was like a doctor, and their main profession was doctoring. And they came up there, and somebody asked him, "Oh, how do you write?" And the doctor come up there and said, "Oh, I wait for inspiration to strike, and I just wait for the right mood." And then the professional author, he thought, "Oh, that's a little bit strange. I come at it from a totally different way. I'm a professional. I have to produce. If I'm having a bad day, there's no such thing as writer's block. You have to write. You can edit out the bad parts later, because all good writing is in editing." And you get a chance to review, and really hone how you want to say the thing that you want to say. But it's a little less so, I suppose, with performance art, because you do it once and it's out there. If you're an actor and they let you do a bunch of takes, it's different. But sometimes if you're just on stage, you have to make it work. Or if you're performing a song live, if it's not coming out right, well, that is what it is. You got to make it. And I feel like there's two different ways of coming at it. It's like one is like you have to push through your doubts about imperfect action, and the other is like some days you just flow better when you're in the right headspace. And it's like it seems like they're saying opposite things, but I don't know. Maybe there's a way to walk the middle path there.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about my own personal practice, and for example, this morning I woke up, I had a sore throat. I'm thinking, I need to. Going in, we're recording a podcast episode. We have a guest, we're committed. Things are scheduled out. I'm teaching tonight. I need to perform. I can't let a small illness get in my way, even though I don't feel like it.
Brian, you just now told me that you have a sore throat, and we are huddled together sharing my microphone because our guest Brian here is using our other microphone. You have just now informed me of my impending doom, of your disgusting bacterial infection that is going to spread all over my blue ball.
Yeah, are you feeling the panic and anxiety about what could happen to you if you somehow catch whatever I might have?
Well, my roommate is kind of slowly dying of the flu back at home, and so I haven't been avoiding her either. So if I get sick, I get sick, and I'll tough it out. But I try not to avoid sick people simply because they need love too.
Yeah, and I figured that
I'll give you some love, Brian.
Thank you. Let's get a little closer then. I figured that your beard would filter out any of the impurities in the air before they reached your nostrils.
No, beards are disgusting. You have to clean them constantly.
So what I'm hearing is that there's probably a higher risk of you getting sick from your own beard than from breathing the air coming out of my mouth.
It's possible that you have a higher probability of getting more sick by being closely touched. Although I did shower just before coming on air, so
you smell great. Is that Suave?
That is a mixture of Suave and Old Spice and
fantastic.
Yeah. Soft soap.
Yeah. So I have a daily practice where when I'm waking up and I am not feeling on top of my game, I immediately sit down and I begin to deliberately intensify the negative thoughts that I have in my mind space.
That sounds unproductive.
It's incredibly masochistic, and when you look to mindfulness as a way to looking at what is so without judgment, we have the ability to either A, avoid feeling the things that we don't want to feel, thank you, or B, we can just go all in and feel it. And I find that the faster and more intensely I'm able to feel what's getting in my way, the more readily it arises and passes. And then I neutralize my attention and I create my ideals for the day.
So you choose not to run from your negative emotions and thoughts. You embrace them, you let them ride.
Oh, I love them.
You see them for as they are. You separate out the mental anxiety that you have from having those feelings. Realize that it's totally normal to have those kind of feelings and thoughts. Yeah. And then you let them go and you move on with your day.
Yeah.
Good.
And they're just a part of my awareness that, my mind does its thinking. That's what it's designed to do. I don't try to shut it up. I don't try to get rid of my negative thoughts. I just go right into it and say, okay, well, this is here for something, so I'm going to find out what that's about. And just like any sensation in the body or thought or feeling phenomenon, it arises and it passes. It's temporary. The nature of reality is as such.
Brian, how about you? How's your personal practice on a day-to-day basis?
Right now, my practice is listening to what's going on over here because I'm digging it. Shining the light of consciousness on our negative thoughts and getting to the bottom of them and moving on after we've disintegrated them with that holy light of awareness. My daily practice is, I try to get in one meditation session a day at least. And that's usually using my mala, but sometimes I will do something that's akin to transcendental meditation, which is also a sort of a mantra meditation, just a little more subtle. And
could you give us an example of a mantra for those of the mindfulness community that are not familiar with the religion of yoga and are only familiar with the posturing, stretching side of yoga?
You may be familiar with Om. Om is a big one. It's kind of like the mantra. It represents the absolute. and it's often you'll find it before many mantras, like the Buddha's mantra, Om Mane Padme Hum, or the.
Can you give us like a really good mantra into the mic so we can?
I could try one. Here's a big Maha mantra for you. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Urva Ukamiva Bandhana Mityor Mukshyama Amritat Om. So that's a mantra for good old three-eyed Shiva and becoming liberated, just like the cucumber becomes liberated from its creeper. So may we be liberated from this world of illusion and, be a cucumber all to ourselves and enlightenment. I don't know, something like
that's
that.
amazing.
Like
I really like that imagery of us as vegetables. In Buddhism, they tend to talk about peeling back the layers of the onion, and that you're looking back at yourself and realizing that there is no self. But first, you have to look at yourself and start peeling back the layers, looking for that center, looking for that core. And then you get to what should be the center, and you just find it's more layers coming out the other side. There is no center, at least in the Buddhist cosmological sense of the term. And I like all this fruit terminology.
Yeah, well,
it's good stuff.
Brian, can I ask you, when was the last time that your cucumber was ensnared in a creeper?
Whenever I'm not looking, those vines start curling around on my limbs and holding me down to this earth. But if I shine the light of consciousness on them, I start to free myself of those earthly binds and transcend into the ether.
Yeah. I was listening to a C.S. Lewis on YouTube. There's a channel where a guy animates C.S. Lewis philosophy, and he just draws it as it's happening. It was really interesting. There was one called The Four Loves. And I believe he's talking about like kind of your internal, mental state and how you can think of it as a garden. And if you allow your garden to grow naturally, it pretty soon won't be a garden. It will just be full of everything. It'll be full of weeds and trees and flowers, but the weeds will often like choke out all the other more desirable plants. And that if you want to have a strong garden, you have to cultivate. You have to pull out the weeds. You have to aid and push the better parts of our nature, and you have to be aware and give attention to the more destructive parts of our nature and rein them in a little bit. And periodically you have to prune and pull up weeds if you want to have a garden.
Yeah, and that requires a focus on our negativity and everything that holds us back. The proverbial creeper, not from the perverted standpoint, but from the standpoint of the invisible ropes that bind us and hold us back from being our ideal selves, can be addressed simply by, as Brian said, shining a light of consciousness on them, which is another way of saying just becoming aware of everything that composes our identities. And we'll find that there are certain thoughts, beliefs, actions, habits, behaviors that we engage in that we're not aware of, but also don't serve us in accomplishing what we want in life. And looking at secular mindfulness, there's this analogy of quick access to stillness of mind to really become aware of everything that's going on. And we use this figure of the snow globe, that the mind is constantly being shaken and it's thinking and it's active, and so the little snow particles are continually clouding whatever the little castle or the little people are inside the little snow globe. And the moment you decide to allow your mind to settle, suddenly the snow globe, which was clouded and very difficult to see through, the snow particles begin to settle, and slowly, little by little, the water inside the snow globe becomes clear, and you can see what's inside.
I like that you use snow globe. I've heard a similar metaphor when you talk about a jar of muddy water, and that you shake up the jar of muddy water and it becomes opaque. You can't see through it. But if you are patient and allow the water to calm itself, the sediment sinks to the bottom, the heavy particulate matter of your life settles, and the clear water rests on top. But you can't help it when someone throws a stone in your lake. When your mind is calm, you have the ability, if you think of your consciousness as water, when your mind is calm, it reflects the world around you much easier. You can see clearly the picture of the universe around you. But when you're shaken up, when the water is ruffled and got waves in it and somebody throws stones in it, and you can't really help that.
Right, but what we can do with constant practice is to lighten the density of the water such that the stones settle more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people try to continue the metaphor, they try to force a calm on themselves by using their hands to smooth the water out, which only makes more ripples. Mm-hmm. You have to let it go. You have to allow it to settle. And that's part of meditation practice, is actually sitting and being with the feelings and emotions that you're having, noticing the physical feeling, and then separating out the mental anxiety you get from having that feeling, and allowing the mental part to ease itself away by becoming familiar with that thing and really watching your object of the breath or the mind. And the physical pain of life never goes away. It's there. That's there for you. That is what life is. It's full of both the good and the bad, the pleasurable and the unpleasurable. Don't try to stop either one of them, because that's impossible. Instead, try to get your mind to calm down about all these things that are going on and just go, hey, it's okay. It's fine to feel this way.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, if you haven't yet subscribed to our email list, we've written a series of lessons that describe how to do this step by step. If you have a mindfulness practice, or if you're interested in sharpening or beginning a mindfulness practice, this is a really good way to start, because the first challenge that we have for you is to sit with your thoughts for 20 minutes. And if you're listening now, I invite you to do that after the show. It's just to sit and observe your thoughts and notice what comes up for you. Notice what repeats. Notice what's there and what's not there. And notice whether you judge it as positive or negative. But I invite you not to roll into the daydreams and get caught up in your judgments and try to resist your thoughts, but rather just to allow them to be there and notice as though you were just curious about what's on the television of your mind, saying, that's so interesting. I wonder how long that thought's going to be there.
BK, what do you think about personal mindfulness practice?
It's a wonderful thing, and one of my practice with the Japa mala that I have around my neck here, it's easy to keep your focus when you have a tangible object. It's a little extra something to pinpoint on.
Like an anchor.
Like an anchor. A metaphor or analogy, or one of the two. It's been described as like your mind is like you're riding an elephant through the forest, and it wants to go and pick up every little stick and rock and examine every leaf, and you're never going to get to where you're going. But if you give that elephant a stick, it's just going to focus on that stick, and you can continue along the path smoothly without any interruptions. Using a mala, it's like a stick in my hand, which I can just focus on to achieve the state of meditation that I'm going after. This practice comes in layers: concentration, meditation, samadhi. Samadhi is a state of superconsciousness that comes about when we achieve a level of meditation. And concentration is a one-pointed focus that dissolves into meditation. Because once we can get our mind focused to one thing, it's easy just to let that then go and then be in a state of meditation. And residing in there, you gain the ability for some samadhi, some superconscious state. That's the practice.
So samadhi is, I guess an equivalent term might be enlightenment?
Yeah. Well, there's lower levels of samadhi and higher levels of samadhi. And we can accidentally get into those states sometimes. When we're unbalanced or unpracticed, you can get into a manic state where your brain is firing, you're feeling very smart, you got a lot to say. And it's a higher state of consciousness, but you're not grounded when you're in a manic state. Now, if you're a practice yogi and you achieve these high states, you can stay grounded from all that practice that you had that kept you solid, and you won't, fall off the deep end, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a little bit different in Zen practice, which is where most of my practice comes from. I studied both Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism, and I'm that in specific And I'm familiar with yoga in general and a lot of the shamanic and non-shamanic religions of India, but Buddhism kind of took a lot of its characteristic meditation and mindfulness practices from India, not actually Hinduism, which didn't exist at the time, but they took it from what Hinduism took their things from. And the idea was that in Zen, it's more of the practice is all important. And realizing what as you mentioned before, Brian, about non-dualism, is that there is no separation between things. There's no separation between the mind and the body. No separation between black and white, up and down, left and right, good and bad. They're two sides of the same coin. And that's just the first step in understanding a larger truth, which is that we use conventional truths to explain the world around us. We use words, trying to explain color to somebody. It's a unique thing that happens to you. Your experience of it is unique. It might be quite similar to what other people see if your eyes are biologically similar, but the truth is that your experience of it and how your brain perceives it is a unique experience to you. And it really can't be shared because of language and communication being the way it is. And that's kind of how I see art, as being a description of the undescribable, regardless of the medium. And in Zen, it's practicing that understanding in every moment and being present where you are, and understanding that you can't separate out these different things, and that we use conventional truths to understand the world, but the ultimate truth is that there are no conventional truths.
Given our perceived limitations in the human body, we do tend to see things as black and white, and it ends up being our experience, where we're experiencing a dual reality. There's the nature to be human in this physical world. And I appreciate what Brian shared about the concept of samadhi, that I know it in mindfulness practice to be a state of mastery over the mind, that when we do reach higher states of consciousness, so to speak, we have a certain level of command over, or a filter through which the heightened states of consciousness can flow through us. For example, if I am an artist with a well-rounded mindfulness practice, when I do receive my divine inspirations to produce something, I don't go off the deep end and lose track of time and cancel all of my other engagements and become irrationally artistic and kind of kooky, as a lot of artists that we know are to be. Instead, I can channel and flow in my inspiration and exercise it powerfully and present it in a way that it's communicated well and people will get it, and I can remain balanced in my mind as I'm in the flow state.
How is your daily personal practice?
My daily personal practice is this. I wake up in the morning, usually around 7 or 8 o'clock, and there was a time when I had it. No, I'm going to wake up at 5:30, and I'm going to read, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to do all these things before the sun comes up. And given the schedule that I've created for myself, I'm up a lot of late nights, and it just wasn't practical. It wasn't healthy for me, so I decided to give that up. I normally stay up until about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I do receive divine inspirations. And as you know, sometimes you'll text me and I'll be editing the podcast or writing an article or doing something related to mindfulness. I'm happily obsessed with what I do, and obsession is part of my daily practice. So when I wake up in the morning, I set out a cushion in the middle of my living room. Normally it's empty and quiet, and I'll sit and I'll meditate for anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. Following the meditation, I do a series of pranayama, or breathing techniques, to help me to observe and intensify any negative thoughts or emotions that may be getting in the way of my ideal performance for the day. So I'll observe my negativity, deliberately go into it, and perform a series of breathing exercises until I find that my mind is neutral and still. And from that point, I've reached a place of pure awareness, and I'll sit there for a few minutes. I'll enjoy the silence, and from that place, I'll create my ideal. So some people like to use affirmations, which I write about in our mailing list. I find that affirmations on their own don't typically work because we have a lot of yucky beliefs about ourselves that don't necessarily align with, oh, I am the all-powerful being of the universe and I create my reality. There's some part of us that goes, yeah, that's bullshit, and you know it. So reaching a state of awareness and stillness, I find, is a really great way to jump over the ego's defense mechanism of our limiting beliefs.
I struggle with some of the more, I hate to use this term because it comes across so negative, but the more woo-woo beliefs out there, because I do believe that they can work if you believe that they will work and you have this kind of
placebo effect.
Yeah, a placebo effect, so to speak. But it is the result that matters for the individual. And no matter what words they use to couch their belief structure in, it doesn't matter if it's working for you, it's working for you, and more power to you for that. Me personally, my practice is I have taken that cue from the Zen book and have tried to make my practice the doing of my art. And for me, I'm not very musically talented. I'm not a good singer. I'm not a good artist, or painter, or actor. I'm a teacher. I'm good at pointing at things. I'm good at showing other people where the best pools of knowledge are. And so when I don't have a regimented personal meditation practice, although I have a lot of experience in meditation, I tend to find that my practice is the teaching, and that I am constantly being aware that when I am teaching meditation or when I'm teaching my apprentice, I'm going out of my way to put myself in their shoes and try to understand the experience that they are having and trying to cultivate an experience for them in a way for me to best direct them towards the next step, which hopefully is a step that I understand. But if it isn't a step I understand, I don't think that matters. I think that my role as a guide is to show the door, and the student is the one that has to walk through it. So I do what I can to make my practice a practice of teaching. And when I am teaching, I'm constantly reminding myself that teaching in itself is learning. I learned so much more about all of the things that I teach after I started becoming a teacher. I was a martial artist for 12 years before I ever taught a class. And then as soon as I started teaching, I started realizing how many of the things that I had held on to that weren't true until I started telling other people about them. And I was like, oh, wow. And then I started learning through teaching, and then doing the same thing with meditation. I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I went to China, and I went to Japan, and I studied in grad school, and I met yogis, and I met abbots, I met monks, and spent months on end in a monastery practicing and practicing and practicing. And then when I went back as an educator to show someone that process and how to do it, it became clear to me. It became so much more clear how my own practice is the doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like really your practice is constantly casting yourself into the unknown to make the unknown known and useful. And the process of learning for you comes in sharing that knowledge and having the consistent curiosity and drive to be learning and to put yourself in the uncomfortable situation of being an authority figure who says, okay, this is where you need to look. This is what you should study. And dealing with the anxieties that come up with being a teacher. I know that when I sit down in front of my class every evening, there's this nervousness that hits me. Even though I've been doing this for almost 2 years, it still happens. And I share this with my students. Just as they are uncomfortable when I put them in certain situations, I put myself in uncomfortable situations, and I feel my nervousness. And no matter how good I get at my practice or at teaching, I'm still going to feel uncomfortable. And I can be okay with that.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling, for me at least, of not having my pencils be sharp enough, and not have done enough homework, not being prepared, not being ready. And I have done the preparation, I have done the studying, but it doesn't matter how much you do, you still feel unequipped. Yeah. You still have that fear of imperfect action, but that is really the way to go. Is that I'm still working on my own practice, but there's no competitive meditating, but just to put it in conventional terms, I might be a little bit farther down the path, and if I can help the people who are coming along behind me, I think that's what I'm here for. That's why I'm on this planet, to help point out the pitfalls along the way for people who are coming into this.
Wouldn't that be interesting if there was meditation as an Olympic sport? How would that even work?
Competitive meditation?
Competitive meditation, is that...
I don't know. Results may vary.
But I think that's a good point. Sometimes when we're getting into a new practice or a new discipline, we judge ourselves and say, well, I'm not that good, or I'm not there yet. And none of us are. And even those of us who have the label of master or doctor, we're still learning and we're still finding our footing in the discipline that we're engaged in. And it's a whole life journey. It doesn't end when you get your degree. It doesn't end when you reach samadhi, whatever that looks like for you. It's an ongoing practice. And when we fail to sharpen our pencils on a regular basis, they stay dull. And we can be concerned all we want about whether my pencils are sharpened enough to take the test. But a dull pencil sometimes will do.
Yeah, they'll still make a mark.
I used to be concerned when I started out doing this meditation with the Japa Mala, the beads, that I was doing it incorrectly maybe, that I was saying the mantra with the wrong tone in my head, or I was using the wrong finger, or that I was just doing it wrong, and I was concerned and anxiety would grow because of that. But that was in the early stages, and then I just realized you're going to have to do this thousands of times. So just go ahead and do it. Do it wrong. You're eventually going to figure out whether you are doing it wrong or not, because at that early stage you don't really know if you're doing it wrong or not. But after your thousandth time sitting in your seat doing it, you get a really good idea of what the goal of this thing is, what the effects are. Comes with the practice. Keeping that practice going takes away the insecurities of doing it wrong.
Yeah, and one thing that people get mixed up a lot of times are the goals and benefits of a meditation practice. A lot of people say, oh, I'm meditating to reduce my stress or to be at peace. And I find that actually that happens to be a fortunate byproduct of the practice, that the practice can actually be really rigorous and stressful sometimes. What have you found in terms of your mala practice that has really benefited you, and why did you start and why do you continue to practice?
Well, I find its effects are cumulative, and if the longer times I can do it consistently, the more benefits I seem to derive from it. I've noticed it's creating a sort of muscle memory in my brain. When I'm sitting doing the meditation practice, it's a very calm state that my mind is in, and therefore, so at least like 45 minutes a day, my mind is in that state, and then it's easier to remember how to get into that state and how to reside in that state. Just because I'm doing it every day, I'm getting very used to it. It's easy to fall back into that. Whereas when I just started it wasn't really a part of me, but now it is, because that is my life for that period of time of the day.
For somebody who's starting out a practice or perhaps wants to sharpen their practice and they're having trouble getting their footing, what's one key thing that you could recommend?
Well, you can't be too hard on yourself, and it's difficult work. You're dealing with all your inner thoughts and emotions, which can be troublesome. So just chip away at it and be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself throughout the process and ease into it. If you have the strength to go hard, go ahead and try it out. But be very forgiving and don't expect too much, and just let the results unfold as they do. But a little bit every day, just a little something every day, just chip away at it, and eventually it's a cumulative process. It'll build inside you and give you a lot of strength, a lot of mental fortitude, focus, all the good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for that, man.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's great to be here. I'm super nervous. I hope to come back again sometime when I have, more practice at this kind of business.
Yeah, well,
it was a great time, though.
Maybe when I finish my month-long abstaining of alcohol, we'll come back and we'll have a couple of drinks beforehand so we can loosen up. That's a terrible mindfulness practice.
Nothing wrong with that.
Do as I mindfully say, not as I mindfully do.
getting to our real fake sponsors. Yes, we have real fake sponsors on the podcast. We don't have any real sponsors yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but if you'd like to sponsor us, you can contact us on our contact page at www.mindfulnessofdoom.com with your interest. And this episode of Mindfulness of Doom brought to you by the Cosmic Asshole. When you first learn that your human body is a toroid of an inner tube and an outer tube in a continual loop, constantly feeding energy in one direction and out the other and recycling it.
This episode also brought to you by Life Hacks at Chipotle, getting you more food for less money.
This episode of the podcast brought to you by Paper and Pencil. Pull out that pencil, pull out that paper, and put some marks on it.
This episode also brought to you by the Powerpuff Girls, reminding you that beards come from the inside.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on Mindfulness of Doom. Thank you again to Brian Kerr. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can find us on Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/mindfulnessofdoom. Interested in checking out some of our writings outside of the podcast, you can find our blog at www.mindfulnessofdoom.com. Cory puts hours and days and weeks and months of painstaking labor and editing into his very tailored blog posts, which eat up a lot of our production time and are totally worth the read. In fact, we just found out that our blog posts are getting about 2 to 3 times the hits that the actual episodes are getting. Cory, what do you think about that?
That is incredibly anxiety-inducing and makes me want to not write anymore.
And if that's the case and you'd like to send Cory some letters of encouragement, you may do so by emailing us at mindfulnessofdoom@gmail.com and address your letter to Cory and tell him, hey, buddy, it's okay.
Yeah, actually, if you have any questions for us and would like them to address us on the podcast, we'd love to start a segment answering your questions about mindfulness or about your practice. So feel free to send us that if you have any questions. Also, you can join our mailing list if you're interested in getting mindfulness tips and techniques for your own practice.
And we just found out that our Facebook page has broken through the 100-follower barrier. We now have over 100 followers, actually 117 as of today, and it is growing rapidly in just the 8 weeks we've been doing this.
Bananas. Bananas. Damn it. Too many nanas.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Yes, and if you're interested in following Brian Kerr, you can find him on Same Old Channel and YouTube.
Well, you can find me at Same Old Channel at youtube.com. Click on the link for extra movies about me. I don't know.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of Mindfulness of Doom. We will see you next week.
Next week!
Doom.
We invite you to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast on iTunes and wherever podcasts of real quality can be found. Have suggestions, music, or artwork for the show? Want to sponsor our podcast? Find our contact page and links to the items we talked about in this episode at www.mindfulnessofdoom.com.
This podcast is recorded at the Center for Social Change in Miami, Florida. It is written, edited, and recorded by Brian Lemmerman and Cory Hardacre. Our music is by Pallettown and can be found at soundcloud.com/Pallettown. All poorly thought out opinions are ours. Nothing you hear in this podcast should be construed as professional medical advice. Go see a therapist, all of you.
You were not mindful of the doom all over my shirt.
Unbelievable, Cory.
Hey, do as I mindfully say, not as I mindfully do.
There you